This is Dr. Paul Thomlinson from Compass Health Network, and we're doing a continuing series aimed at inspiring hope and promoting wellness through the application of evidence, whether derived from scientific research or from stories of lived experiences, to the challenges and issues of these times we're living in and living through. This episode is tied to our calendar of observances, with April designated as Celebrating Diversity Month, as well as Minority Health Awareness Month. I don't think it's ever been more important that we truly celebrate our differences than it is now. Not just tolerate differences. I've never been a big fan of the term tolerance in this context, but actually celebrate the differences in how we live, how and what we believe, what we eat, how we dress, the entire rich tapestry of human life and culture in all its staggering beauty. Nature adores diversity, and we humans, as part of nature, ought to follow suit. Observe it, appreciate it, and celebrate it. If you're not a member of a marginalized group, a group that's been otherized because of your ethnicity or race, your color, your language, your religion, you may have difficulty imagining what that's like. And one of the ways we can become more aware of diversity and have more respect for it is to hear stories of such lived experiences. And that's what this episode is all about. Now, like many of you, I was alive and well and remember with flashbulb clarity where I was when those planes crashed into the Twin Towers and the Pentagon and that field in Pennsylvania on September 11, 2001. And I remember the feeling of shock, horror, rage, and grief that followed, especially upon learning that the murderers were religiously motivated and that they had killed over 3,000 innocent people in the name of their God. I also remember feeling especially concerned because I am keenly aware of how human beings react when they're afraid. And given how deeply terrified we all were around that time, I knew it wasn't likely to go well for our friends, family, neighbors, and colleagues who were Muslim, either religiously or culturally. And I was right to be concerned, as the FBI statistics on hate crimes against Muslims and generally those of Middle Eastern descent have borne out over the years. But with the sole intent of awareness raising and development of deeper mutual understanding, I've always wanted to have and share a candid conversation with someone who experienced being a Muslim American both before and after 9/11. I got to do just that this month, and in the spirit of inspiring hope and promoting wellness, we offer this episode, which is a conversation between Darla Young, one of my favorite humans, who's Compass's Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, myself, and a wonderful man who also happens to be a Compass psychiatrist, whose name and its proper pronunciation you are about to learn right now. I want to make sure that your name is pronounced properly, so do you mind just saying it how you like to say it?
So since I've been in America, I just say Omar Quadri, but I was born with Omar Qadri. That's how it would be said in back in Pakistan. But because in spelling my name, the Q is followed by a U, so everyone says Quadri. I refer to myself now as Quadri rather than Qadri.
That's exactly why I asked the question, because I was thinking that was probably the case. I was like, that doesn't sound particularly Pakistani, Quadri. That sounds like an anglicized version, but
it is.
So it's Omar Qadri.
That is exactly right. You said it just right.
Flipping those R's, yes, Paul. I felt that.
Yeah. Well, that's from my Spanish training, but it applies here too, I think. So maybe just start with sharing a little bit about what it was like for you growing up in that culture. Give us an idea of some of the cultural aspects that you maintain.
I had a really happy childhood, what I would consider normal, and normal as defined by everyone around me was doing pretty much the same thing I was. Pakistan does not have the tradition of women getting educated very much, especially in my mom's or my parents' generation. Now women are educated a lot more than they used to be. So my mom was an outlier in that she was a graduate even back in the 50s and 60s. She graduated from college. My father was a military guy. So I had a pretty sort of protected childhood because I was always growing up on these bases. Did not have a lot of exposure to civilian life until I started going to college. So religion was just kind of like a taken for granted sort of thing. It wasn't particularly emphasized. It was more like a general sort of awareness that you are lucky to be a Muslim because it's maybe the shortest path to God's good graces. I didn't even read the Quran until I was like in the 10th grade when my parents suddenly realized, oh, he's getting close to going to college. We need to give him some education in the Quran. That was the first time I read it. But there was a general sense of being lucky or being fortunate to be born in the right religion, so to speak. Since then, I've had my own personal reasons for not being particularly religious, but there are lots of things about Islam that I really value. And one of those is egalitarianism. The religion focuses a lot on everyone being equal. And the only thing that differentiates between people is their good deeds. And those good deeds are then divided into God's duties, or things that you need to do for God and things that you need to do for people. So there's a strong emphasis on human rights and what are called hukukul ibad in Islam, which is the rights of the people. And there is a strong emphasis that if you do wrong by God, God can forgive you for those sins that you commit against God. But if you sin against people, then even God cannot forgive those. And you have to seek the forgiveness of the person that you have wronged. So that's a value system that I still appreciate a lot, which is a 1400 years old version of human rights. That if you do wrong by people, then that's unforgivable. And from that then flows charity, emphasis on taking care of people who are less blessed or have like widows and orphans or people who have fallen on hard times. Your character is judged by how you use your resources, not for yourself, but to help other people. So there is that those are some aspects that I really appreciate and still like and abide by.
I appreciate that you were talking about the Quran. Can you describe that a little bit, what that is for those that may not know? Because that may be a brand new word for some of our folks.
So Quran is the Muslim holy book, and Muslims believe that it was revealed to Muhammad like 1400 years ago. And Muslims basically see Muhammad as a continuation of the same and sort of like the third chapter, so to speak. So there's the New Testament, the Old Testament, the New Testament in the Quran. But it is basically seen as first an endorsement of the previous books, i.e. the New and the Old Testament. So Quran affirms the truth of those holy books, and then it basically sees itself as sort of a course corrector. So in Islam, it is more not that the previous religions are wrong, but more as that over time they kind of deviated. And so this is really what God intended, and this is like the final correct version. So there's a lot of commonality and endorsement of previous faiths and of all the previous prophets. And then there are like rules. It's very prescriptive. I think that is something that's different about Islam, is that Muslims see themselves not just as a religion, but as having sort of a code book of life, or because there are lots of prescriptive things like do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. Muslims revere it as the unalterable word of God. So that's basically what it is.
I'm struck by a couple things you said. Well, many things you said. One of which is I love the piece. I'd never heard it put that way before, where God can forgive you for your sins against God, but you have to seek the forgiveness of an individual, another human being that you've wronged, if I understood you correctly.
Exactly.
Which I
Even
think,
God cannot forgive you for injustice committed against another human being.
and that's so the implication being you would need to go to that person and seek their forgiveness, make atonement to them, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have to seek their forgiveness, and God cannot intervene in that matter. And you'll have to pay for that if that person does not forgive you.
Amazing. I'm as a psychologist, I'm very interested in the study of forgiveness. There's a whole lot of research on forgiveness, the health benefits of forgiveness, and I think having that built into Islam is a beautiful thing. Where you need to go and take care of this yourself. Take agency to seek forgiveness, which has, by the way, we know great health benefits as well. So. Thank you for sharing that.
You go and lie to someone or cheat someone or steal from someone, and then you just go and pray and it's going to make it all okay. That cannot happen. You have to make it right by those people.
You came to the U.S. to complete your medical training in 1991, and so you know what it was like before and after. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, for example, how were you, if you were treated differently before and after 9/11?
I would say that before 9/11, there was a certain innocence about America. And by that innocence, I mean a sense of naivete, so to speak, about the rest of the world. And Americans by nature are very friendly, they're very open, they're very generous and very welcoming because it's a nation of immigrants. So my experience in that sense was very, very positive. Like everyone was very welcoming. I used to read about like prejudices against other people, but I had never felt it myself. The first time I actually had any experience of stereotyping me was actually during my residency when the Oklahoma City bombing happened. This was pre 9/11, but some of my residents who were my dear friends, they just immediately taunted me and said, "This must be your people." So that was very jarring and very hurtful because I don't consider them my people. They're not my people, anyone who does that. And then 9/11 happened. But prior to 9/11, there was generally like I personally never had any experience with stereotyping or anything like that. After 9/11, there was a sudden shift, and I think it's natural for people to get suspicious and paranoid or fearful when something so traumatic happens so abruptly. So I could understand that, but then there was a generalization from that fear, and everyone gets lumped in because I think our brain does a stereotyping to make sense of a lot of data in a short period of time. So lumping large groups of people into one category makes it easier for us to kind of figure out how to react to them. So after 9/11, I suddenly felt like uncomfortable in my skin in the sense that when I would go to the gym, nothing about me had changed, but suddenly like all the highs and hellos were gone and people acted a little more distant, like I wasn't really there. There was no overt aggression towards me, and thankfully, and not towards my family either. But there was a constant stream in the news about people getting targeted or people just running to Canada out of fear that they would be targeted. So there was just a general sense of fear, and that kind of pervaded into every aspect of life. So one of the things I remember is like when I was growing up, I was an ardent reader of Reader's Digest. My father always used to say, "This is a very good magazine. You should read it." And in that, there always used to be these articles about then Soviet Union and how the Soviet Union would use the KGB to train people to spy on each other and then report to the state. So immediately in the aftermath of 9/11, it was the U.S. government basically saying, if you see something, say something. And I understand it was coming from a security perspective, but at the receiving end, like people felt like, what have we done to be scrutinized like that? So it was a very like living through a dystopian reality. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, I can only imagine how difficult that was. And you mentioned the brain, and I think we're aware that the human brain is essentially a big threat detection system, right? So, and how difficult it must be when you, because of the way you look or the way you sound, are put into a category where folks have that switch that's flipped in their brain that you are a threat, that you are by definition a threat to me, and that reorients their reaction to you in every single way. And so I'm glad to hear that you were never, attacked physically. There was never aggression. But we know, for example, the FBI crime statistics show that after 9/11, hate crimes against Muslims and folks of Middle Eastern descent spiked, and they really have never returned to pre 9/11 levels, even 20 plus years on. So I'm just wondering, in terms of your own experience of interacting with others, how that's impacted you.
I was never angry. I was always kind of sad and disappointed. I felt like I was being unfairly judged. People who did not know me had an opinion about me without knowing my character. So that was the main sense of loss, personal loss. Like people should judge you by your actions, but once you get lumped in with a category, it's very hard to remove yourself from it because you can't change how you look, you can't change how you talk. And at the time 9/11 happened, I was actually working in Farmington at the state hospital there. So I was worried about my safety because every day I was living in St. Louis in Baldwin and driving down 70 miles one way 4 days a week, and I was always worried like what if someone sees this brown dude driving down a country road and they get mad at me and try to attack me. And so there was that pervasive sense of fear. And I'm not one to have, I don't subscribe to outward signs of or symbols of patriotism. I think that's something that's very, that's felt within your heart. It's that conviction. But I felt like for my safety, I have to have like overt signs of which team I'm playing for. So I found like US flag stickers and I put them all over my car. So from no matter which angle you looked at it, you'd see at least one flag, just so people knew overtly where my loyalties lay. I had not felt the need to do that before. My parents live in Pakistan, and when I talked to them on the phone, we knew that NSA is monitoring all communications and they're looking for certain keywords. So my parents are elderly. I told them, you have to be very careful in how you talk to me because I don't want to get into trouble for something silly you say. And so just that kind of fear.
Yeah, and that was actually one of my questions was that very thing. Did you have a sense of, I really need to kind of prove myself as a real American? And you just answered that. So I can certainly understand your sense of trepidation given what was in the water, so to speak. So that had to, it seems to me like that would have some definite emotional, mental toll after a while. I mean, having to speak to your parents that way and ask them to be careful of the way they speak with you. I can only imagine what that must have felt like, and the scrutiny and so forth. So could you talk about that a little bit in terms of your experience? What did that feel like over the course of days, weeks, months, and even years now with that post 9/11 attitude?
So it just felt very exhausting. So it was like fear laden over time because it becomes like a chronic stressor. So you have acute stress, which you can react to and kind of goes away after a while. But then if something is pervasive and it just stays there for a long time, then it just has an effect of wearing a person down. And so I did become very vocal in being very pro-American in a lot of forums as a way of showing a different side of Muslims. And from my knowledge of psychiatry, I try to basically speak to people that religion does not make people good or bad. It enhances who you already are. Let me define that. I've never seen a psychopath or a sociopath become non-personality disordered because of religion. They just become more sociopathic. So people who did 9/11, they were psychopaths to begin with. They'd get sanctions because in all faith traditions, there are ambiguous passages that you can use to rationalize or justify your own depravity. And that's what these people did. And everybody else got labeled for it. So there are people like my wife, she's an observant religious person. She has never judged me for not being religious. She does her own thing. She never goes out and tells others what to do. She just lives her own life in the way she sees fit. She prays and she fasts and does all that. She was a good person who I think is a better person because of her religion. So I think if we look at it that way, religion is like a knife. It can cut for you and it can cut against you.
Beautifully said. I have a song that I wrote that basically says that very thing, which is if your religion doesn't make you better, if it doesn't make you kinder, if it doesn't make you gentler, if it doesn't make you more, loving, then you really probably should question whether you've understood it properly.
That's exactly right.
You said something else that got me thinking another direction about, can make a sociopath even more and elevate their sociopathy, whatever, and how unfair. And most Americans, I really believe, have a fundamental sense of fairness, So I feel like we can appeal to Americans' sense of fairness to say it's just so wrong, unfair for an individual to be, or a group of people to be associated with the worst example of that particular of a person who labels himself as being such and such a religion, who may be the worst sociopath in history, and yet you get somehow guilty by association, which is an unfortunate human characteristic we see playing out sometimes. So I'm wondering, in terms of beginning to shift the conversation toward positivity and what we can learn from these painful experiences, like what maybe is there anything, and when you think about 20 years on now, living in post 9/11 America, what lessons and most important things have you learned that might be helpful for others as we think about sharing this conversation?
So things have definitely gotten better. And if you look at American history, Americans have a great capacity for self-correction. And we see this all throughout our history. There was course correction after the internment of the Japanese people during the World War. So Americans tend to be very self-reflective, and they value their goodness. And fortunately, they have freedom of speech, which seems at times like we're always fighting or quarreling or loudly disagreeing, but I think it's a good thing because it allows for a free marketplace of ideas. And from constantly getting different ideas and different thoughts, we don't kind of give in when we're in a public forum, but then we go home and reflect. And I think that's where minds change. So whenever people are like debating on social media or on Facebook or Twitter, they're never going to give an inch. But I think those arguments are, so long as they're not promoting hatred or hate speech or causing, motivating people to act out violently, I think we should disagree. There are 3.5 million Muslims in America as of 2020. It's the third largest religion in the US after Christianity and Judaism. So I think over time, people have kind of concluded on their own that if there are 3.5 million people of this faith living amongst us, working, paying their taxes, where's all the violence that these people could have committed?
Exactly.
So people are generally pretty wise, and they come to these conclusions on their own. And also because Americans have this fairness compass in them. They like to be fair, and justice is an important aspect of our society. So that gives me a lot of hope.
I love that. And the fairness compass, what a great phrase. I'm going to zero in on that. But I have to say, I'm shocked that you, if I heard you correctly, you've asserted that arguing on social media about politics and religion all day with strangers is not an effective change strategy. I can't believe that you would say such a thing. But you did seriously say something about being able to disagree, because I think dissent and disagreement, as you kind of pointed out, this is American as apple pie. We need to be able to disagree and respectfully dissent. Certainly, what the research shows about group dynamics is that if you don't feel like you're accepted as a member of the group, that you're not willing to dissent, and we need it. We need people to say, that's just not right, or I disagree. There's another way of looking at that, and we need that kind of input in public discourse. And I think one of the tragedies of 9/11 and anything that marginalizes folks where they don't feel safe dissenting or saying, that they disagree, that's dangerous to our democracy. It's dangerous to our functioning as a society. So I was really, really happy to hear you put it that way.
Well, I was just going to say, I really appreciate, Dr. Quadri, how you talked about in the beginning when you came to America, and it's an innocent place, and it's a country of a nation of immigrants. I wrote down that you said, and then all these things started to happen that kind of built up people looking at you maybe a little differently or having some questions for you. And you started to feel that. And then, of course, 9/11 happened, which was a big moment that you had no part of guilt in any way, but yet all of a sudden, as you said, I had not changed, but something was different. And you felt that. And you also recognized that was folks' comfort because they were just scared and unsure. And then how you brought it right back to, and I saw your smile. I wish everybody could see your smile as you speak of this about now, how Americans value their goodness and they're self-reflective. And I just really appreciate how through your experiences, you still come back to how great this country is and the opportunities are and how we do try to take care of each other and do our best to do that. So I appreciate you sharing that. It's a real story of hope when you had every reason to not have that story. So thank you for that. It was really great.
Yeah. Amen to that.
I truly feel that, and I feel like America is great because it is because of that self-reflection. We are always trying to be better and trying to reach higher than where we are at. It doesn't mean that we are ever perfect. And I always say to my friends or my children that the day you start thinking you're perfect, you'll start to go down, because that means that there's nothing else left to strive for. But Americans are always striving to be a better society. And I've seen that in the context of 9/11. So and that's the pendulum. Like America always kind of swings back to its center over time.
I certainly agree, and I see some evidence of that. I see some evidence of some folks maybe being more resistant to change than I would like personally. But I think the big, as you say, the arc, the pendulum swing, is just as you describe it. And on that, this podcast is in celebration of diversity. We'd like to make this relevant to anyone who feels, one of our new words, otherized, someone who feels similarly situated. That is, they're misunderstood, they're stereotyped as a result of how they look, or the way their name sounds, or the color of their skin, or whatever. So, what have you learned about how to stay well, how to be who you are in the midst of challenges to that very identity in many cases?
I felt like the most important thing is to not get bitter and to not get angry. Because if you get bitter and if you get angry, then you do become a caricature of your stereotype. Yeah, so don't let the environment define who you are. So I've always looked at like alternate hobbies that are creative, like photography or music or learning an instrument, as a way to kind of calm my own anxieties and have an outlet. But to anyone who feels marginalized, I think the first thing is don't get bitter and remember why you came here in the first place, or why your ancestors came here. With all the things that we struggle with in this country, it is still a land of great promise and freedom. And I feel that people, when they act out of it, when it seems like they hate you, they are actually coming out of a position of fear. And fear is born out of lack of knowledge. So why do people fear darkness? People fear darkness because they don't know what lurks in that darkness. That darkness is the lack of knowledge. So I think people who are like myself, they need to reach out and they need to not isolate. They need to do the exact opposite, which is join different discussion groups, different forums, go to barbecues, let people get to know you. When people get to know you, they see your humanity. When people see that, then you're not other anymore. And if you're not other, then you're part of the family. And you too will get assimilated. And there are so many other people who came before you. They were otherized also, but now they are mainstream Americans. So you're just the new kid on the block. That's how I see it.
Well, cheers to that, to not being other anymore. I love how you put that, for sure. What we know from social psychology, and I'm always thinking about it from that perspective because that's who I am, I guess. There's really only one cure, one well-established cure for prejudice and hatred and racism, and that is direct exposure, actually interacting with the other person that you view as other. So I love how you put that, and I think the main message I think maybe all of us would probably like to get out to folks is if you're afraid of them, if you hate them, get to know them. I love one of my favorite Abraham Lincoln quotes, and he's been attributed, a lot of things have been attributed to Lincoln that he never said, but he actually said this one. Pointing to a particular individual, he points to them and says, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better."
Wow, that is so profound. And when people feel unsafe, they want to get rid of whatever it is that is making them feel unsafe. And often it is just lack of knowledge. You get to know the other person, and you find out that they are more or less like yourself.
Well, this has been a real treat, and you've shared some incredible wisdom, and what an amazing heart and mind you have. And thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. We appreciate you so much. It was so good. You're such a light. So no, I what you said and how you brought it around to make it so universal and common humanity. And thanks for going on this journey with us. It was great.
Thank you. And what Darla said about your smile, and that being a light, that's the only downside of this being an audio only. Is
Yeah.
that folks can't see how you really light up and when you speak. So I wish you all could see that.